Welcome back to Free Media. I'm Robby Soave.
I'm Emily Jashinsky. Now, Latino voters, especially men, shifted dramatically toward Donald Trump on Tuesday night, with exit polls indicating a massive 31-point swing. In 2020, Joe Biden won Latino men by 23 points, but this year, Trump appears to be up by 8 points among Latino men. What a swing.
Here's how NBC's Chuck Todd explained this shift.
Hispanic voters are swing voters, and I think, what's interesting here is the Republican Party treated them the same way they treated white working class voters. They courted them the same way they treated white working class voters. The Democratic Party has spent a lot of time treating it as an identity group. Whether it's Latinx, which sort of fell flat. And so there's been a lot of hand-wringing about this inside Democratic circles, a real split, it was a total misread sort of by the coastal strategists when it comes to how to target working class voters of color. And I think we're starting to see sort of a working class coalition start to drift to the right. Before, Donald Trump had working class whites. Now he's adding working class Hispanics and working class, not necessarily seeing evidence of working class African Americans, but adding working class Hispanics, that becomes a very durable majority.
So I think Chuck Todd's analysis there is largely correct, but it's kind of funny when he said, those people using Latinx, those coastal elites, as if that is some category outside his sphere of influence. No, Latinx, the only place in which that terminology was used was on cable news, was on liberal, mainstream, progressive, elite cable news, and nowhere else. So the kinds of people he puts on his show are the ones who tried to make that a thing, alienating actual Latino voters in the process.
Elizabeth Warren actually used the term Latinx in an early primary debate in 2020, and you really started to see it fizzle a bit since then. But it is interesting. It's one thing when you and I say the coastal strategists are out of touch. It is another thing when Chuck Todd says it, even if he does it with that sort of aloofness, typical.
Yes.
That's maybe Donald Trump's best nickname, by the way, is Sleepy Eyes.
That's
what he calls Chuck Todd. It might be my favorite, just personally.
Although we all have sleepy eyes this morning.
We sure do, but it's just so random. That's why I like Sleepy Eyes. This is what Republicans have been saying over and over again, and they've been ignored. And to Democrats, it's been completely to their own peril. It's so counterproductive for them to keep saying that Republicans are bigoted and racist and dumb, to treat working class Hispanic voters the way that they do, when Dems are saying it's all disinformation, they want to be courted specifically on the basis of their identity. Trump is running up the numbers with working class voters right now as the results are coming in.
But does that also point to a fear that Republicans have had that has not been well-founded? And you know where I'm going to go with this, because you've participated in this discussion with me. You moderated immigration debate panel that I did against Jack Sowick and Ryan Girdusky, where we argued for what felt like 20,000 hours.
Yes,
and we were
with Chase Oliver.
Just exhausted as we are now by the end of that. But one of the arguments that I hear, we argue about the economics and the crime and all that, but one of the arguments that conservatives use to say why we need less immigration is that buying into the Democratic idea that demographics are destiny, and you bring in all these minority voters, Latino voters from other countries, and this will give Democrats a permanent majority. They'll outvote the native citizens. And what I have tried to point out and argued against is that, but many of these people who come in are actually more in tune with conservatism than the native-born population, is particularly if they're fleeing socialist countries. Many of them are religious, Catholic even. The Catholic vote now becoming a more Republican vote, as Amber told us this morning. Hardworking, don't love socialism, and so on. I know that's not everyone, but it seems to me that a lot of these immigrants, minorities, do have values that better match what the Republican Party is trying to build than the elite, highly educated, disproportionately white and black but native-born people.
It's an interesting point. I mean, it looks like the Hispanic vote is still majority going to go to Kamala Harris. And I think what you're picking up on rightfully is the trend. And this trend is really starkly in the direction of a shift towards the Republican Party. Although what I would say is it's representing a shift towards Donald Trump. And whether Donald Trump and the Republican Party remain the same thing after the next 4 years, because 4 years that we have ahead of us right now feels like a lifetime, but it's not in the span of the broader Republican Party's existence. So if if other down ballot candidates and potential Trump heirs are able to keep those numbers with Hispanics is a completely open question, because I don't know that there are other candidates that are going to be able to tap into that really singular appeal that Trump has.
That's true for Latino voters, but that's also just true generally speaking for the Republican Party. I can't conceive of what the Republican Party is without Donald Trump at this point, because he just is the party. In fact, there's split ticketing going on that up until now was seen as a bad thing for Trump. You know, the idea that
abortion in Florida.
that on the ticket other Republicans are doing better and he's underperforming them. That was the case in different election cycles. Not the case anymore.
Yep.
The Republican Senate candidates who still might win many of those races, but they're behind where Trump is. People are voting for Trump and then not for the other Republicans, pointing to the fact that it's just his party. The party is whatever he says it is. He can change his mind about whether to ban TikTok or whether to have a national abortion ban or whatever the policy is, and the people, it's whatever he says it is.
And it's a double-edged sword. You know, it's his party, but there's nobody else like him. So,
yes.
You know, even if you're J.D. Vance and you are sort of channeling the ideological populism into a policy agenda, are you going to be able to have a rally at Madison Square Garden that brings together wildly popular stand-up comedians, even if they're politically incorrect, with Dr. Phil, and then get the endorsement of Joe Rogan? I mean, maybe, but even so, it doesn't have the same, we know for a fact that it wouldn't have the same feel, the celebrity feel that Donald Trump brings when he's able to put on these well-orchestrated, massive rallies. It's just something that you're not going to see with anybody else. So does that hurt the numbers? I don't know. Open question.
We will be waiting to find that out one day. I don't know when that day will. That could be 100 years after his death. Will be when the Trump era is truly over. We won't know it until it happens.
So true.
More free media right after this.